Namaste and pranam, everyone. So, continuing from last time when we learned about the stories of Randev, King Amrish, Vamana Avatar, Matsya Avatar, Gyavana, and Sukanya, and a lot more. Now, we are moving into the rather more uh, well known and interesting bit of this. Shri Paramatmane Namaha. So, once again, many years had passed since all the stories and events that we heard of had occurred, and Mother Earth was in trouble. She had suffered greatly under the weight of inhumanities practiced by the Daityas. She could not bear the burden of those inhumanities anymore. So she took the form of a cow and, with tears rolling down her cheeks, went to Brahmaji, the father, and implored him to do something about it. Brahmaji took pity on her and took her to Shivji, and the Devas. They all went to Sri Vishnu's abode. So Brahmaji, Shankar, all the Devas, along with Mother Earth in the form of cow, went to Vaikuntha. There he worshipped the preserver of the universe and entered into deep meditation. Within his heart he heard a voice saying that the Lord already knew the troubles of the earth, that he would incarnate in the house of Vasudeva, and that the celestials would also take birth to aid him in his mission. Alright, so you know who's gonna make an appearance. Devaki was the princess of Mathura. Ugrasen, the king, was her father, and the powerful and wicked Kansa was her brother. So Devaki, her father, and her brother. Devaki was a very cultured young lady, both virtuous and beautiful. She was given in marriage to a noble young man called Vasudeva. After the marriage ceremony, Vasudeva took his bride away in their chariot, which was loaded with gifts and beautiful and costly, which they had received. Now, Kans was very fond of his sister, so he declared that he himself would drive the chariot to Vasudeva's house. He was going to become the charioteer. The procession started to the sound of shankh, drums, and trumpets. Everyone was feeling happy and was in a mood of joy and merriment. Devaki herself glowed with the happiness of a bride, and even though she was a little sad at leaving her home, her eyes sparkled with the adventure of the new life beginning for her. And she was proud that the chariot was to be driven by no less a person than Kansa himself. As the procession moved, the chariot rolled merrily along. Everyone was laughing and singing and joking. Kans took the reins of the horses in his own hands. The proud monarch made a striking picture as he urged the horses forward. But all the fun and merriment stopped suddenly when a heavenly voice cut across like the crack of a whip. It said, "Fool! Know that the eighth child born of this very young girl you are driving now shall be the cause of your death." Kans's face suddenly changed. It became ugly and distorted. His eyes became bloodshot. He lunged at Devaki and caught her by the hair. Swiftly he drew forth his sword and was about to cut her head off when Vasudeva restrained his hand, and in a gentle pacifying tone, he said, "Kans, you are a noble king. Why do you want to suffer the disgrace of killing a woman, and that to your own sister at that, on the very day of her marriage? Look at her, how terrified she is. We all have to die, whether now or after 100 years. Devaki is innocent and helpless. Besides, not she, but the eighth child of her womb shall be the cause of your death. So desist from this terrible action." Kans was hard and adamant. He was not at all moved by Vasudeva's pleas. Vasudev thought quickly and said, "If you spare Devaki's life now, I promise to hand over to you all her offspring when they are born." Now this arrangement found favor with Kans. He put his sword away and ordered the wedding procession to move on. Vasudeva felt relieved that he was able to ward off the present danger. He prayed to the Lord and hoped that the future would take care of itself. Lord's grace divine is always with his sincere and true devotees. In due course, the first child, a bonny boy, was born to Vasudeva and Devki. True to his word, Vasudeva took the baby to Kansa and handed it over to him. Kansa appreciated this gesture of honesty and gave the child back, saying that he had nothing to fear from it since it would be the eighth child of Devki who would cause his death. Now, as Kansa was sitting feeling happy with this generous gesture, Narad came to him. His eyes twinkled mischievously as he said, "What have you done, Maharaj? Do you not know that all of Devki's children are to be rays of Lord Vishnu? Narayan will incarnate as the eighth child. All his supporters in Vaikunt have already taken birth in the Yadav clan. They will also help him fight you and other Daityas. Be careful, Kans. Do not take any risk. Narayan, Narayan." And as quietly as he had come, he left. His work was done, and the name of the Lord was upon his lips. Sweat broke out over Kansa's brow. His mind was in great disbelief and trouble. Although he already knew his fate, this was still an alarming and shocking bit of news, particularly because it came from the special messenger of Narayan. He issued orders to put Vasudeva and Devki in jail. They were bound with fetters and chains and thrown into the darkest dungeons. He took no risk with Devki's children. As each one of them was born, he had it seized and put to death instantly. In this manner, he did away with 7 of his nephews. And then, Devki was once again big with child. She shone with the divine luster and looked at the very picture of auspiciousness. Even Kansa did not fail to notice that his sister had a special glow about her. Now he was certain that she carried his fated enemy in her womb. He had an irresistible desire to kill her there and then. It would not be an easy way to do away with his foe. But then he thought of the sin and shame he would incur for having killed a helpless pregnant woman. No, he would wait till his hated enemy was born, and then he would show them all that nobody could kill Kansa. Why? What did he have to fear? He would take the baby as soon as it was born, and that would be the end of it. It was as simple as that. And although he had worked this out so carefully in his wicked mind, he knew no peace, for something gnawed at his heart. He would sit day and night consumed by worry and anxiety. He put his father into jail and seized the throne himself. He grew hard and cruel, and people became afraid of his power and tyranny. His score of wicked deeds started piling high, and yet with all the power and strength in the world, his nerves were completely shattered. The most feared king of the world sat nervously biting his nails, awaiting the birth of his enemy. It was midnight. Kansa's place was enveloped in darkness. Men of goodness and purity were at their prayer and worship. The constellation Rohini was rising in the heavens, Rohini Nakshatra. The stars shone with an unearthly beauty. In the heavens, the Devas played divine music. The Gandharvas and the Apsaras sang and danced. On earth, the flames of the Yagyas, which had been suppressed by Kans, suddenly shot up. The celestials waited with bated breath, for on earth was to take place the most blessed event in all times to come. Krishna Janma Dhamano Hato. The helpless and friendless Vasudeva and Devki sat cold and desolate in their prison. Fervently they prayed to the Lord and asked him to protect them and their child. The hour was at its darkest. Devki swooned, and suddenly the room was filled with a brilliant light. It seemed as if a second sun has arisen. Their eyes dazzled. Vasudeva and Devki could barely look at the source of the light, for there stood Lord Vishnu himself in all his divine magnificence. In his 4 hands he held the Shankh, the Chakra, the Gada, and the Padma, the lotus flower. His bosom bore the mark of Srivatsa, and on his chest shone the Kaustubh Mani. He was dressed in golden yellow silk, pitambar, and the diadem of his brow sparkled with the glitter of its magnificent unearthly precious gems. Vasudeva and Devaki folded their hands and bowed before him, and in that moment all the grief and suffering of the bygone years vanished. Their eyes were lit with the light of love as they gazed upon the enchanting, dark complexion of the Lord. Sri Vishnu blessed the couple and then spoke to them. Father, mother, he said, your days of sorrow are now over. Too long has the earth borne the burden of the wicked deeds of the impious. I have manifested myself for their destruction. Father, take me now to the house of your good friend Nanda in Gokul. His wife, Yashoda, has just given birth to a baby girl. Exchange me for the daughter and place me by Yashoda's side. Bring the little girl here into the prison. Nothing shall bar your way. You and Mother Devaki will both attend my being by meditating upon me as your son as well as the Supreme Brahman. And then the light was no more. By Devaki's side lay a little dark baby whose complexion was like that of a rain-bearing cloud. Shyam, Ghanshyam. The mother lifted him into her arms and kissed his sweet face. She fondled and rocked him. Then silently Vasudeva took the baby from her. Avakadabda Shugai, Nanda Gera, Nanda Gayo, Jai Kanaya Lal Ki, Hatti Goda Pal Ki. Once now that journey will start. She fondled and rocked him. Then silently Vasudeva took the baby from her. Devaki thought her heart would break. Then she remembered the words of the Lord and derived comfort from them. She composed herself and fixed her mind on Adi Narayan. As Vasudeva moved towards the door, the strangest thing happened. The chains that bound him dropped away from their own accord. One after another, the doors of the prison swung open. The guards had fallen into an unnatural deep slumber, and within moments he found himself walking through the streets of Mathura. It had now started raining. There was nobody on the streets. People were fast asleep in their homes. Carrying the divine baby, Vasudeva arrived at the banks of the river Yamuna. The waters were twirling and swirling in an angry flood. Suddenly, the waters parted and a ford appeared between them. Vasudeva walked through the river carrying the baby high above his head, lest the waters should touch it. The celestial thousand-hooded Sheshnag protected and guarded them as a moving umbrella for the divine Lord of beauty. Bhagavan Mate. When Vasudeva arrived at Gokul, he saw that everything was absolutely hushed and quiet. He entered the house of Nanda. Nanda Gera Nanda Bhayo. Yashoda, his wife, was fast asleep. By her side lay a little baby girl. Quietly, Vasudeva picked her up and in her place he put the little baby boy. Then he crept away and came back to Mathura. He gave the baby girl to Devaki. Then slowly the prison gates by themselves closed on him and he found himself in chains again. When the guards heard the lusty yell of a baby coming from the prison chambers, they hastened to give Kans the news. The sky was still dark and the hour was just before dawn. Kans was having nightmares and bad dreams. He woke up with a startle. He was still in the stupor of the dazed sleep, rudely awakened. With disheveled hair and bleary eyes, he stumbled towards the dungeon. Devaki saw that leery expression in his eyes and clutched the baby closer and retreated into a corner of the prison. No, no, not this one too, she cried piteously. Leave me this little baby. You have snatched all my innocent children so far. Besides, this one is only a girl. What harm can she do to you? But she saw that Kans was unrelenting, and she hugged the baby in one last motherly embrace. The wicked king snatched the child from her hands and, lifting it high in the air, was about to dash it against the stone wall. And lo, the infant slipped from his fingers and rose up into the air. Suddenly she became the shining, resplendent goddess Lakshmi. Fool, she said, you will gain nothing from destroying innocent children. Your enemy has already been born, and when the time comes, he shall indeed destroy you. Dare you hope to avert the will of the Lord? Kans was wonderstruck. He trembled violently and then came to his senses. He removed the fetters and the chains of Vasudeva and Devaki and fell at their feet. Forgive me for my wicked deeds, he said. Like a Rakshas, a hard-hearted stone, I have killed your innocent babies. The Lord will indeed have a terrible punishment in store for me for these my heinous sins. Heinous sins. Vasudev and Devaki felt sorry for him and forgave him readily. Kans then called the Daitya counselors together and told them what had happened. Now they all had stupid Asuric minds, so their thinking was clouded. Obviously, they gave him serious counsel and advised him to kill all the infants born within the last 10 days. Said, kill them all, O brave king. Do away with the enemy of the Asuras. At the most, the Devs will attack us, and we all know how they fear your arrows. Give us the orders. Permit us to destroy Vishnu. He is the strength behind the Devs. Once this omnipotent power divine is removed, how can the gods survive? Brahmins, cows, Veds, asceticism, control of the mind and the senses, faith, kindness, tolerance, and sacrifice are the limbs of Vishnu. We shall destroy all these too. We believe in a purely materialistic secular life. Where we succeed, how can Vishnu survive? Kans, because he himself had basically a wicked mind, was easily caught in the maze of their Asuric arguments. The prospect of doing away with his enemy appealed to him very much. He directed the Daityas to oppress all good people and to put all their own suggestions in practice. So this was the story of Krishna Janma. And once again, Nanda Gera Nanda Vayo Kanaya. Now, in Gokul, where Nandji had a baby boy now. So in Gokul, there was great joy. Mother Yashoda woke up in the morning to find a beautiful little baby lying by her side. She looked at him and was overwhelmed with happiness. Here was the little one, all her very own. Here was a joy beyond words, for the world had never seen such a lovely child before. Hers was the joy of total fulfillment. Soon the entire household, the entire village actually came to know that in Nand's house was born a most heavenly child. Nand was the chief of the Yadav clan. The rejoicings were on a large scale. The streets were swept clean, flower garlands were hung at the door of every house. Clean, fresh water was sprinkled on the roads, and all along they were decorated with flags, buntings, and flower arches. In Nanda's house, the Brahmins chanted Vedic hymns and invoked upon the child the blessings of the Lord. Nanda gave cattle and wealth in plenty to the Brahmins and to the poor. The Sutas sat and recited the Purans. Minstrels sang of the valiant deed of the heroes of the old and of the ancient kings. The musicians played on their instruments. The Gopas, the cowherds, wore fresh clothes, smeared their foreheads with sandal paste, and wound their way to Nand's house to wish them well. The Gopis wore their best garments, which were of the most brightly colored hues and shades. They lined their eyes with collyrium and wore jasmine in their hair. Then, with their swirling skirts swishing from side to side, they laughed and danced their way to Nand's house. In scented water, they mixed oil and turmeric and sprinkled it on each other for good luck. Ekdam, Harsha Ullas and Umang. The Gopis perhaps had the greatest fun of them all. They took for Yashoda's presents of curd, butter, and milk. They took turns with each other to fondle and caress the baby. Some praised his dark complexion, some of his black curls, some of his twinkling eyes, and some his smile of pure joy. This was an important occasion for the simple men and women of the Yadav clan as they bubbled over with their happiness. They sang and danced to the rhythm and tambourines and cymbals and flutes and lyres. They gave thanks to the Lord and chanted divine hymns in his praise and glory. And what had started for them his irrepressible merriment ended in rapturous ecstasy. Ekdam Anand. All right, enough Anand. So now enter some villains. So these are the two villains that entered, Putana and Trinavarta. Trinavarta. Now, Kans came to know that a baby boy had been born in the house of Nanda at Gokul. Nothing could be proved, but nevertheless he had a sneaking suspicion that it must be his dreaded enemy. So all his efforts were aimed at getting rid of that child. His crooked mind worked out all kinds of schemes to put the infant to death. Putana was the most frightful and dreaded of the Rakshasis. She was treacherous and villainous to the very core of her being. She knew all kinds of magical tricks and spells which helped her in her asuric work that she did for Kansa. She was always at Kansa's behest. She entered Gokul. By her secret powers, she transformed herself into a lovely lady. She wore garments of shimmering silk and decked herself with the most gorgeous ornaments. The fragrance of jasmine in her hair had the strangest power of attraction. With a graceful sway of her hips casting sidelong glances, she made her way to Nan's house. Nobody even thought of barring her way, for she was extremely well dressed and looked as though she came from a very high, noble family. She went up to where Mother Yashoda was sitting with her little baby. She cooed over the child in a honeyed voice. Yashoda was really impressed by this magnificent stranger. Putana then begged to hold the infant in her arms for a few moments. Very sweetly, she asked Yashoda if she could plant a little kiss on the child's forehead. How could the proud mother refuse such a simple request? Then the wicked demoness suckled the child to her breast, which was full of the deadliest poison. By this time, she had already gone out of the courtyard of the house under the pretense of entertaining the baby. What she, in her stupidity, did not know was that he was none other than the Lord himself. He clutched at her breast with both his tiny hands and sucked hard. He sucked and sucked till he had drawn out not only all the poison, but also the very life breath of the Rakshasi. At once she regained her old hideous form and screamed out aloud, "Enough! Enough! Let go! No more! No more!" She gasped and writhed and struggled all in vain, for the child would not leave till he had sucked the last drop of life from her. She twisted her body this way and that, kicked her hands and legs helplessly about with all the strength she could muster, and she perspired profusely. Her hair got mangled with the dust, and her entire body shook so violently that it set the earth trembling. Finally, she crashed to the ground with a roar that resounded in the three worlds. People scattered in fear, and all the trees within 12 miles radius fell down uprooted. Then all was quiet. 12 માઇલ સુધીના બધા ઝાડ પડી ગયા જ્યારે પૂતના નીચે જમીન પર પડી. કેટલી ભયંકર હશે. Mother Yashoda came hurrying out to see what had happened to her baby. Oh, what a relief it was to see that her darling was absolutely unharmed. But to her horror, she saw that he was playing happily on the dead carcass of an awful demoness. She held him close and kissed his little brow over and over again. She shuddered to think what her fate would have been had the Rakshasi succeeded in her plot. But the baby, apparently oblivious to the sensation he had created, smiled contentedly, and snuggling into his mother's arms, promptly fell fast asleep. बोलते तो माया करी but ये ऊँघी गया. The people of Gokul then chopped Putna's body into pieces and set fire to it over logs of wood. It was evening and the night curtain was slowly falling over the village. The flames of the pyre licked high and the curling smoke went up. A lovely fragrance spread everywhere. Even the tamasic body of a hideous sorceress had been purified by the touch of the Lord himself. When Kansa came to know that Putana had failed in her task, he summoned to him an Asur whose name was Trinavarta. This Asur was cunning and tricky, and his ways were more demoniacal than Putana's. He could raise dust storms and whirlwinds at a moment's notice and could easily sweep away into a cyclone the heaviest objects of the earth. One day, Yashoda was sitting with her baby in her lap in her courtyard when suddenly she felt him grow heavier. Every moment his weight increased till at last he grew so heavy that she had to put him down. This was a strange thing to happen, and she grew frightened lest it forebode evil. She ran into the village to find if anyone could explain to her the meaning of this strange phenomenon. In the meantime, Trinavartasura saw his chance to do his dirty mischief. He raised a terrific storm. The wind raised a blinding dust which clouded the whole atmosphere. Dust got into the hair, eyes, and mouths of people. They could see nothing. Their breathing got choked. They stumbled and clutched at any support they could find. Gokul had never known such a tornado before, and with all the force and power he could muster, the Rakshas lifted the baby high up into the swirling wind. Mother Yashoda put out her hands to feel for her little one, but she could not reach him anywhere. She screamed loudly and then swooned away. Meanwhile, the demon was using all his strength to lift the baby higher and higher, but he found it increasingly difficult to do so, because with every passing moment he grew more and more in weight. He clutched at the throat of the Rakshas and tightened his grasp on it. Trinavart started choking. It was his plan to lift the child to a great height and then to dash it to the ground so that escape from death would be impossible. But his plan was properly foiled. The child grew heavier and heavier, and the Asur grasped more and more for breath, gasped. At last the agony became too much for Trinavat. Like a heavy stone hurtling down, he fell through the air, the whirlwind of his own creation, and crashed upon a rock. His body was shattered to pieces, and his eyeballs popped out of their sockets. Like a huge mountain, he lay there. He was senseless and quiet death. The dust had now settled and the air had cleared, but the baby was lost. Nowhere could he be seen. Till at last, a search party found him on the outskirts of Gokul playing on the lifeless body of the Rakshas. Yashoda was hysterical with tears and laughter to find her baby safe and sound. She kissed him again and again and held him as though she would never let him go. When they got home, she gave him his feed, for the poor little fellow was hungry. Then she put her fingers to his tiny mouth to wipe the milk off from his lips. In a sleepy yawn, he opened wide his mouth. And there Yashoda saw the entire universe. The sun, the moon, the stars, the mountains, the rivers, the oceans, the animals, the birds, and everything in the cosmos. Overwhelmed by such an inexplicable vision, she trembled and closed her eyes. But her divine son was to show her many, many more wonderful things. So, this was the story of Krishna Janma, and Krishna is already a little baby toddler in Gokul. He has already freed Putana and Trinavarta and purified them. The next time we will talk about the naming ceremony of the baby and take the story further. So once again, Nanda Gera Nanda Gayo Kanaya Lal Ki. All right, Namaste and Namaskar.